one pocket that we thought could actually be doing is actually performing much better than maybe what the larger ones are saying, putting out, because the future of technology lies in digital and cloud, automation and artificial intelligence, and maybe the mid-cap companies more nimble, more adept at moving around, and not heavily dependent on the traditional verticals. So let's talk about all of that and more with two eminent experts. Sudin Apte, Principal Analyst and CEO at Offshore Insights, as well as Prabal Basu, former CFO at Polaris. Gentlemen, both of you, thanks so much for joining in. Mr. Roy, let me start off this conversation with you. That one standout feature across mid-cap IT, save for an exception or two, has been that their revenue growth and their bottom line performance has been much more consistent than what the large cap IT stocks have done, maybe over the last couple of quarters. Why would this be happening, you think?
Hi, Nirav. Good morning. Well, it is happening for a host of reasons, but I don't think really, Niraj, it's a question of mid-cap versus large cap. And I'll tell you what I mean.
I think we seem to have a slightly patchy line. We'll try and patch that. But Sudin, if I can pose that same question to you. I think Mr. Prabal Basu is saying it's not a question of mid-cap versus large cap. While he was trying to explain that, and we'll get to him in a bit. But what are your thoughts here?
I think a couple of points. I'm actually still little away from saying that it's a trend or established, fact that mid-cap is doing better than some of the larger companies. Yes, last 1 or 2 quarters, and especially last quarter, we have seen select mid-cap companies doing better. 2 or 3 reasons. Point number one, and I think maybe that's what Prabal was trying to say. Point number one, I think as the requirement of client changes, there was a requirement for Indian IT companies to transform themselves. So smaller and mid-sized companies possibly are easier to transform than transforming Infosys, Wipro, TCS, etc. That's point number one. Point number two, it's a fact of life that last few quarters we are seeing more activity by mid-sized companies compared to large companies, primarily because if you look at TCS, Infosys especially, and to some extent Cognizant, there are still some unsettled organizational issues which is keeping these companies busy inside. There has been a little bit of an attrition on the sales front side. So a lot of those reasons made mid-tier companies a little bit active on account. But that may be a short-term trend. Point number three, specialization plays a bigger role, and building specialization in mid-sized companies is relatively easier than some of the larger companies. Point number four, the current quarter, which is the second quarter or third quarter for American companies, those 2 quarters are relatively always better because new budgets have kicked in. So that can be another reason why we are seeing some of the increase in performance, especially top line.
Yeah, Sudin, I have a slightly broader looking question. I think typically for the last 2 decades, as we've seen IT services grow in India, clients were picking IT vendors based on their scale, the number of people they had on the bench, the ability to do large size contracts. That seemed to be the offshore model. When it comes to being able to give out digital contracts, what is it that clients are looking for? And is that skill set or that talent, does that reside in some of the larger companies that have access to better talent, or does that reside in some of the smaller companies that are more nimble on their feet?
Sure, that's a good question actually. When things have moved from traditional ADM infrastructure type of services to more of digital, whether it's new content, new pervasive computing, etc. I think 3 or 4 things which have evolved, which are very different than traditional IT services model. Point number one is very deeper understanding of domain, and by domain I don't mean technology or just a broader level vertical, but business process or even a sub-process level understanding. One need to know really how a retail works, how they do merchandise and things like that. Similar for mortgage, credit card, financial services, healthcare. The understanding of business processes is extremely important. Point number two, you need to have an ability, obviously technology-led ability, to transform those processes to get a different experience for client. So your ability to deploy those digital solutions in an effective way has become far more important. Point number three, three, a lot of companies are saying that show us something which is, less risky. ADM projects typically, or deploying a large package app, are typically risky in terms of on time, on budget. So they may get delayed, they may not exactly meet the requirement. And compared to that, if you have an IP-led solution, your ability to deploy and your ability to match the client requirement is much better, and the predictability of solution is much higher. Now, a lot of these solutions, one can argue just by a number of people working on those things, or the inventory of assets in those companies. I think tier one companies do have those assets and those people and those capabilities, but they have larger challenges of ADM and infrastructure and testing to defend. Point one. Point two, I think, they're also busy internally. And point three, larger companies' navigation is always difficult compared to mid-sized navigation. So those are the reasons why responsiveness of some of tier two companies you see relatively quicker and more effective compared to large firms.
Okay, Mr. Prabal Basu Roy, I think, is back with us. Mr. Roy, you were saying the same thing. You thought that this was maybe not necessarily the building of a trend, or maybe it's too early to speak about that as yet.
Yes, actually, I missed some part of the conversation, so Sudin may have talked about it. But essentially, it's like this, according to me. Hello, are you able to hear us?
Loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. See, essentially, in my view, it's like this. Number one, of course, it's too early to call a trend. But it's not necessarily a big company being more nimble than a smaller company issue, according to me. And the reason I say that is because Accenture has been able to play this game extremely well. As you know, has been widely reported, the digital revenues of Accenture is about 52% of its total revenue, versus Indian IT companies in the range of 20 to 25%. And the entire growth of the quarter revenue of Accenture this year has been more than the total revenue of TCS, right? So they are playing this game very well. The reason they're playing this game very well in terms of reorientation is because they lead effectively consulting-led and product solutions-led. That is the key. And because of that, they're getting more and more customers from the new technology areas. Digital, as we always say, is it's a sort of an umbrella term for social, mobile, analytics, cloud, IoT, etc. So the clients of that, who are giving businesses to Accenture are people like, Google, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, and so on and so forth. That clientele is looking for solutions based on a consulting-led approach, because you have and that is where our Indian companies are weak, and that's precisely what Vishal was trying to do for Infosys, by the way. So that is one of the big issues which is facing the large IT companies. As far as the mid.
Okay, I think we're having still some trouble with the line, but we get the point that you're making, Prabal, which is that it's typically the share of the consulting pie that Indian IT services companies have not done a very good job of, especially the top line ones, and that companies like Accenture have done a very good job of, which is what's giving them the larger share of the future business. My question then to Sudin would be this, that who do you see being able to make the most of this next big wave in IT services? Because if it were consulting, then actually, let's be honest, the big four in consulting, which is the EY, the Deloittes, the KPMGs, they're also doing a fabulous job in technology consulting right now, and they're giving the likes of Accenture, etc., a big run for their money. So what portion of this business will really come to Indian IT companies, and which ones of them do you think stand the best chance to gain from it?
Sure. I think there are 2 points, I wanted to add to just consulting led. One I have already said earlier, but let me just repeat that briefly. I think business process and the client's domain understanding is extremely important. You should be able to add a value to your client's experience of interacting with you. So more that ability, I think clients are more interested to interact with you. So that's the second point in addition to consulting-led sales. Third thing, I think what has happened is a lot of the buyers of these type of solutions are not traditional IT buyers. So they don't know the offshore model. So they prefer the people who are onshore. They prefer the people in the same geo or region, at least for the larger part of a upfront engagement. So, unfortunately, the visa regime and challenges in that, those have become few additional problems for Indian IT industry. So combination of things are working, against Indian IT. I think, the problem is, as I said earlier, the transformation paces are very small. And I must say that I think the larger Indian IT companies group, possibly except TCS, haven't really made a clear direction and are not charting on that path for a substantial period of 18 months or 24 months. There is a flip-flop of strategy. There have been changes intermittently, etc. And unfortunately, in case of TCS, the path is charted out, but they're still aiming at a lower end of the pyramid. For example, even if they want to pitch an automation, they want to pitch automation on IT ops as against business process automation. So I think that's the really challenge for Indian IT industry.
So Sudin, who is doing it right? Sudin, who is doing it right?
So that's so to me, really, today, I think there are pieces which are being done rightly by some of the top two companies, both TCS as well as Infi. Right, Prabal said just now, I think, there's again uncertainty in Infosys, which is creating a challenge. So really no one in tier one who have a solid direction. In tier two, there are companies which obviously are doing well currently, those who are focused on specific areas. Mindtree in pockets, Syntel in pocket, some of the other tier 2 companies. I feel that, but again, I don't want to call any winner at this stage because it's too early to call anyone winner.
No, just who's best positions. It's interesting you said Mindtree because Agam, who tracks IT for us here at Bloomberg Queen, pointed out that, whilst most of the mid-cap IT companies don't give you a digital revenue number, Mindtree, I think, has given a number of about 43%, which is twice that of the about average 20% that the top-line guys get from digital. Now, it's also a base thing, but nonetheless, the fact that you mentioned Mindtree is interesting. Who else would you add to that list is best positioned to be able to take advantage of these changing winds?
So I think, from a different perspective, Persistent is another company which technology-wise very superior to deliver these solutions. They have a right relationships in the place. So that's another name that comes to my mind. Only challenge for them is that they can't go and deliver the same solutions to end user. They typically tend to work with another technology company like say Salesforce.com or some such company, and then with them they try to work with end user organizations. No problem. So that's another company which I would name if I had to pick two who are ready to deliver digital solutions.
Fair call. Sudin, we'll leave it at that. Unfortunately, out of time at this point.